Botswana sifiwe Kenya. Here Iguazu
Atunia kadenewa anake akasusa mekia makadira anake makarogera jesonde que odera inahane todo emoyo.
Gospel musician Iguazu AC, whose official name is Dwight, before he reinvented himself as a gospel musician, preacher, and philanthropist, had worked as the first secretary at the Venezuelan embassy in Nairobi until July of 2012, when he became one of the main suspects in the murder of his boss, the Venezuelan ambassador to Kenya at the time, the late Olga Fonseca, who was brutally killed just 12 days after she had landed in Kenya to start her new job. In this episode, we unpack the Venezuelan embassy power struggle that left Olga deceased, one suspect related to a former Kenyan defense minister on the run, and 4 men, including the embassy's first secretary, Dwight, behind bars. Before Olga took on the position of ambassador at the Venezuelan embassy in Nairobi, her predecessor, Geraldo Alexis Silva, had been appointed ambassador in 2010. That same year, more specifically in July, Dwight moved to Kenya to support the work at the embassy, and not long after his arrival, he was promoted to the position of first secretary, which meant that he held the number 2 position at the embassy. But here's the thing, how Dwight rose to become a high-ranking diplomat in just a few years was questioned and later explained by the New York Times. As reported by the newspaper, Dwight had previously worked as a lawyer for the Ministry of Labor in Venezuela, where his duties included representing the country at international meetings to discuss labor issues. He later changed jobs and secured a post at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which led to his diplomatic assignment in Kenya, where he was soon promoted to the second highest position at the embassy. The New York Times explains Dwight's unusual rise through the diplomatic ranks as a result of corruption and favoritism under President Hugo Chavez's administration, where loyalty was valued over merit and unqualified loyalists to the Chavez administration were rewarded with high-ranking government jobs. But as often happens in such regimes, the same administration that handed Dwight a high-ranking position in its government without merit later hung him out to dry. And as you shall see, his fall from grace came just as quickly and just as questionably as his rise. Dwight's appointment as the first secretary at the Venezuelan embassy in Nairobi came with its fair share of drama. His first boss, Ambassador Geraldo Silva, accused him of insubordination and of refusing to recognize his authority. As a result, there was always tension at the embassy. This power tussle between Geraldo and Dwight was only the tip of the iceberg when it came to the toxic work culture at the embassy. In March of 2012, the embassy was rocked by a major scandal when 3 male workers, the cook, driver, and a security guard, accused the ambassador of sexual assault and harassment, including but not limited to groping and indecent exposure. The workers then filed a sexual assault complaint at the diplomatic police unit in Gigiri the following month, April of 2012. These allegations marked the end of Geraldo's tenure as the Venezuelan ambassador to Kenya, as he was summoned back to Venezuela by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and left Kenya on 19th May 2012. Upon his return to Venezuela, he was stripped of his role as ambassador, and back in Nairobi, Dwight was appointed as the acting ambassador at the embassy, a position he was to hold until a new ambassador was posted. Finally, Dwight was sitting in the number 1 seat at the embassy that he had long wanted. But here's the thing, he wasn't running the show at the embassy alone. He was unofficially supported by his close friend, Mohammed Hassan. Mohammed, who was not an employee of the embassy, was essentially Dwight's sidekick. He wielded so much power at the embassy that he paid the workers' salaries, kept the books of account, approved staff leave, and even drove around in a car with diplomatic number plates. And that's not all. Dwight and Mohammed moved into the ambassador's official residence in Runda together. Yes, they also lived together. One question you may have is, who is Mohammed and how did he get involved with the Venezuelan embassy? Mohammed is quite an interesting character in this case. First of all, despite several news sources referring to him as a doctor, he wasn't. As explained by his father in court, Mohammed was admitted to a medical college in Karachi, Pakistan, and spent 13 years in the country between 1998 and 2011, when he returned to Kenya without completing his medical degree. When he moved back to Kenya, he became an imposter diplomat who walked around town claiming to be the Pakistan's diplomat to Kenya. It was within Nairobi's diplomatic social circles that he met Dwight. As per Dwight's account, their first encounters were during the National Day celebrations at the Brazilian and Saudi embassies. Mohammed was also friends with Geraldo Silva, and he would frequently visit the Venezuelan embassy, and over time, his friendship with Dwight grew as well. Here's another thing about Mohammed that may explain why he saw himself as untouchable. He was the nephew of the late Mohammed Yusuf Haji, who served as Kenya's Minister of Defense from 2008 to 2013. Remember, Dwight's position as acting ambassador was not permanent. Soon enough, he received official communication from the Venezuelan Ministry of Foreign Affairs that a new ambassador, Olga Fonseca, would be posted to Kenya and was expected to arrive in July of 2012. Dwight and Mohammed were not pleased with the news and were determined to prevent the incoming ambassador from taking up her post. Mohammed even told the embassy drivers that he would use all his influence to stop Olga from coming to Kenya. Nevertheless, his efforts proved futile. As Olga's arrival drew near, Mohammed and Dwight shifted their focus to making her stay in the country as difficult as possible. They even met with the managing director of the company which owned the house in Runda, leased to the embassy as the official ambassador's residence. In that meeting, Mohammed falsely presented himself as a Venezuelan embassy official. Together with Dwight, they instructed the managing director not to interact with the incoming ambassador Olga Fonseca under any circumstances, unless Dwight personally introduced them. And on 1st July 2012, Dwight renewed the lease of the ambassador's residence, where Olga was later murdered. By deliberately renewing the lease himself and instructing the owners of the house not to contact Olga, Dwight was evidently trying to delay Olga's move into the official ambassador's residence, where he was living with Mohammed. As Dwight and Mohammed continued to run the show in Kenya, creating roadblocks for Olga, 57-year-old Olga Fonseca was back in Venezuela preparing for her new job. She had a briefing with the officials at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and one of the key instructions she received was to dismiss all staff at the Nairobi embassy. She also had a farewell party during which she confided in her brother that she was deeply worried about what awaited her in Kenya, to the extent that she feared for her life. Olga had even asked some of her relatives to accompany her to Kenya, but none of them were able to join her. Olga finally landed in Kenya on Sunday, 15th July 2012, but tragically, just 12 days later, she would be found brutally murdered. When she arrived at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Dwight and one of the embassy drivers called Francis were there to pick her up around 7 p.m. But tensions between Dwight and Olga began immediately when, instead of taking her to the official ambassador's residence, Dwight instructed the driver to take her to the Tribe Hotel at the village market. Although Olga was initially reluctant to go to the hotel, she eventually agreed to leave. Once the car left, Dwight remained at the airport with Mohammed, who had been at one of the lounges the entire time. When the car arrived at the hotel, Olga refused to get out, and she insisted for the driver to take her to the official ambassador's residence. She completely refused to get out of the car, and Francis had to call Dwight, who came and spoke to Olga privately. It turns out Dwight lied to Olga, telling her that the landlord was unwilling to renew the lease when in fact he had already renewed it. He also lied to her that there were ongoing renovations at the house. After their conversation, Olga reluctantly agreed to stay at the hotel. After spending the night at the hotel, Olga remained frustrated that she couldn't access the ambassador's residence. Luckily, through another employee at the embassy, she obtained the contact information of former Machakos Senator Jonathan Muthama, the owner of the house rented to the Venezuelan embassy as the official ambassador's residence. Subsequently, Olga arranged a meeting with Muthama and his wife, during which she shared her frustrations about being denied access to the house and the disrespect she was receiving from the embassy staff. She also confided in them that she feared for her life. Olga finally managed to move into the house on Tuesday, 17th July 2012, and by the time she moved in, Dwight and Mohammed had already moved out and found another house also in Runda, where they continued living together. Being unable to access the ambassador's residence was just one of the many headaches Olga faced as the new ambassador. Thanks to Dwight and Mohammed, it was indeed true that the staff did not recognize Olga's authority and held deep resentment toward her. The reason? Dwight and Mohammed had led the staff to believe that Olga would fire them if they did not withdraw the sexual assault charges against the former ambassador. To make matters worse, Dwight never formally handed over authority to Olga when she arrived. This left the staff uncertain about who was actually in charge. Some domestic staff members even thought Olga was just a guest of the embassy. It wasn't until Olga called a formal staff meeting on Tuesday, 24th July 2012, that she firmly asserted her position as the head of the embassy. By this time, it was also evident to the staff that there was bad blood between Olga and Dwight, since the two would often get into heated arguments, yelling at each other publicly. The third major headache Olga faced involved access to the embassy's 5 official bank accounts. After Geraldo Silva was stripped of his duties as ambassador, Dwight became the sole signatory to those accounts. As part of the official handover process, once Olga received all her paperwork, including her diplomatic identification and work permit, she was to be added as the new signatory to the embassy's bank accounts. Her diplomatic documents were officially processed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kenya on 17th July 2012. Although Olga had all her documentation in order, Dwight prevented her from being added as the new bank signatory. According to one of the managers at NCBA Bank, which was then known as Commercial Bank of Africa, the bank received a letter on 24th July 2012, signed by Olga, requesting that signatory rights be transferred from Dwight to her. The very next day, they received a conflicting letter signed by Dwight, instructing the bank to retain him as a sole signatory. Due to these conflicting instructions and in line with the bank's policies, the accounts were frozen until Olga and Dwight could resolve the matter. Tensions between Dwight and Olga continued to escalate, reaching a point where, on Wednesday, 25th July 2012, Olga instructed the head of security at the ambassador's residence not to allow Dwight or Mohammed onto the property under any circumstances. This was just 2 days before she was killed. Given the growing tensions at the embassy, Mohammed and Dwight set the ball rolling on getting rid of Olga. They may have chosen murder as the solution to the power struggles at the embassy because they believed they were above the law. Dwight had diplomatic immunity and Mohammed was related to the defense minister at the time. To carry out their plan, Mohammed lured 3 men, Ahmed Omido, Alex Wanyonyi, and Moses Kiprotich into the scheme by promising them better fortunes. The way these men came to know each other is quite interesting. Ahmed, a businessman, knew Mohammed from the mosque in Nairobi West, where they prayed together. He believed Mohammed was a diplomat because he saw him being driven around in a car with diplomatic number plates. Ahmed in turn knew Alex through a mutual friend. As for Moses, a retired police officer, he had only recently become acquainted with Alex. He claims they became friends in July of 2012, the same month Olga was murdered. Just days before the murder, Ahmed called Alex and told him there was a job opportunity at the Venezuelan embassy. Alex in turn called Moses and asked him to accompany him to Muthaiga. When Alex and Moses got to Muthaiga, they alighted a matatu at a Total petrol station where two cars were waiting, a Toyota RAV4 with diplomatic number plates and a Toyota DX which belonged to Ahmed. Alex got into the RAV4 where Mohammed and Ahmed were already seated. For Moses, he got into the other car where he sat alone. About 20 minutes later, Alex emerged from the RAV4 together with Ahmed. They got into Ahmed's car, the Toyota DX, and drove to Nairobi CBD, where Alex and Moses alighted at Moi Avenue. While they were walking together, Moses asked Alex what had been discussed inside the RAV4. Alex told him that there was a power struggle at the Venezuelan embassy between Mohammed and the newly posted ambassador Olga. He went on to say that the conversation in the RAV4 had been about how to eliminate her. 2 days later, Alex invited Moses to meet him and Mohammed at Java in Gigiri. During the conversation at the cafe, Mohammed complained about Olga, calling her a nuisance and saying that she would soon know who they were. After their chat, the trio parted ways but met again the following evening at the same Java around 7:30 p.m. They had dinner together, and as they were breaking bread, Mohammed told them that he had already given Ahmed 468,000 Kenyan shillings to eliminate Olga, but expressed doubt about whether Ahmed would go through with it. After dinner, the group briefly parted ways and later regrouped at Maggie's pub. Alex and Moses were first to get to the pub, and Ahmed later joined them. Mohammed arrived at the pub around 12:30 a.m. When he arrived at the pub, he had changed out of the suit he'd been wearing earlier. Now he was dressed in a jacket, t-shirt, jeans, and sports shoes, a look that the prosecutor would later refer to as his murder outfit. Back in Runda, Olga had been enjoying the night over drinks with the second secretary at the embassy called Jennifer and her husband. After a chilled evening, Jennifer and her husband left the residence and Olga retired to bed. By the time Olga went to bed, the domestic staff who lived in the servants' quarters on the compound were also asleep. To give you some context, the ambassador's residence included the main house and a separate staff quarters where the embassy driver, Francis, 2 housekeepers, and Peter the cook lived. The compound had only one entrance, a main gate about 50 meters from the house. It was enclosed by a K-apple fence with an electric barbed wire, but both were in poor condition. The K-apple fence was quite thin and easy to get through, and the electric barbed wire wasn't working. Additionally, there were no CCTV cameras and the alarm system was faulty. In short, the security at the ambassador's residence was so poor that it created the perfect setup for something to go wrong. At around 2 a.m., Peter the cook, who had been asleep, got up to use the bathroom, which was outside. As he stepped outside, he encountered 4 men near the swimming pool. The men pinned him down and warned that they would shoot him if he screamed. In his court testimony, Peter said that one of the men was Mohammed, who asked for his phone, made a call, and then told him to go back to his room and not mention that he had seen him that night. But before Peter could return to the servant quarters, Francis the driver, who had also been asleep, woke up after hearing a commotion outside. When he stepped out to investigate, he saw Peter visibly shaken, surrounded by 4 men. Francis recognized one of them as Mohammed. Mohammed even acknowledged him, saying, "It's me, Francis. Go back, go sleep." Both Peter and Francis returned to their quarters without raising an alarm. It's likely they did not raise an alarm because they knew Mohammed and did not see him as an intruder. When morning came at the ambassador's residence, the day began like any other. The gardener, Julius, arrived around 7:30 a.m. At the gate, he found a car with security personnel who said They had been sent to replace the day guard, but they hadn't been able to reach Olga to make the proper introductions. To assist, Julius walked to the main house and rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. He then tried contacting office staff from the embassy without success. Finally, around 9:05 a.m., he managed to reach Melissa, the third secretary at the embassy, who also tried to call the ambassador without success. Concerned, Melissa asked Jennifer, the second secretary, and her husband, who had been with Olga the night before, to go to the residence and check on her. When Jennifer and her husband arrived at the house, they joined the domestic staff in calling out to the ambassador repeatedly but received no response. Determined to find out what was wrong, Julius climbed up to the first floor of the house from the outside, and he was able to access a balcony near Olga's bedroom. He managed to pull aside the curtain to Olga's bedroom and through the window saw Olga lying motionless on her bed. The scene was disturbing. Olga, who was evidently deceased, had a white electronic cable tied around her neck, hands, and feet. Following the gruesome discovery, the police were called immediately. Meanwhile, at the house shared by Mohammed and Dwight, events were unfolding that were rather suspicious. Around 10 a.m., Mohammed instructed the gateman not to open the gate for anyone except staff from the embassy. For any other visitors, he said his direct authorization was required. An hour later, around 11 a.m., the gateman reported that Mohammed's lawyer arrived at the house and spent approximately 3 hours with Mohammed. Shortly thereafter, Mohammed left the house in a taxi. Back at the ambassador's residence, the police had arrived. As they started their investigations into Olga's murder, they found that the main door to the house was undisturbed, but the kitchen door showed signs of tampering. They also observed that the electric wire on the perimeter fence near the swimming pool had been cut. In addition, there were muddy shoe prints near the swimming pool area. In Olga's bedroom, the police noted that Olga's phone, a BlackBerry, was missing. After processing the scene, the police moved Olga's body to the Lee Funeral Morgue for preservation and an autopsy. The police also interviewed both the embassy staff and the domestic staff at the ambassador's residence. Through these interviews, they learned of internal power struggles at the embassy and identified that the only individuals who had ongoing issues with Olga were Mohammed and Dwight. The officers then proceeded to the house shared by Mohammed and Dwight. Mohammed was not home, but they found Dwight, and due to his diplomatic immunity, they could not arrest him as a suspect in Olga's murder. According to the gateman, when the police were still in the house, Mohammed returned, and when the gateman informed him that police officers were inside the house, he reversed his car and sped off, never to be seen again. Olga Fonseca's murder at the Venezuelan ambassador's residence shocked the world. The fact that an ambassador had been killed in their house made it even more puzzling. As news spread, 3 big questions were on everyone's mind: how Olga had died, who did it, and why. The first question was answered on Saturday, 28 July 2012, when an autopsy was conducted at Lee Funeral Home led by Dr. Johansen Odur. The autopsy revealed that Olga died from asphyxia. It also showed she had been strangled by hand and the cord around her neck was tied after the fact. The very same day Olga's autopsy was carried out, a letter from the Kenyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs was sent to the police commissioner stating that Dwight no longer enjoyed diplomatic immunity. The said letter was accompanied by another letter from the Ministry of the Popular Power for Foreign Relations of Venezuela, which notified the Kenyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the cancellation of the diplomatic passport assigned to Dwight and the previous ambassador, Geraldo Silva. The letter further stated the two had ceased acting in their official capacities. Dwight's diplomatic immunity disappeared in an instant, and not even Dwight's lawyers could answer why the Venezuelan government had chosen to take away his diplomatic immunity so fast, even without conducting any internal investigations. His fall from diplomacy was as fast as his rise there. Consequently, he was arrested on Saturday, 28th July 2012. The arrests did not end there. More heads rolled as investigations into Olga Fonseca's murder continued. In October of 2012, 3 months after Olga's death, Alex, Moses, and Ahmed, who are believed to have entered the ambassador's residence and killed her, alongside Mohammed, were taken into custody. Then, in November of 2012, Juan Kipngeno Kirui, a security guard at the Turkish embassy, was also arrested for being in possession of Olga's phone. The only person who was never arrested was Mohammed. Despite intense efforts by the police to find him, he vanished without a trace. On 6th August 2012, the police received a tip from the public saying Mohammed was hiding at his mother's house in South Sea. But when the police got there, Mohammed was nowhere to be found, and there was no evidence that he had been there. Given that his uncle was the Minister of Defense at the time, it was not a surprise that Mohammed had managed to slip through the cracks. To date, his whereabouts remain unknown. After his arrest, Dwight spent 10 months in custody before he was finally granted bail on 2nd May 2013. His earlier requests for bail had been denied over concerns he posed a flight risk and might interfere with witnesses. He was released on a cash bail of 2 million Kenyan shillings under strict conditions. He had to report to the police station every 2 weeks, attend all monthly court mentions, surrender his passport to the court, and remain within the court's jurisdiction unless granted permission. And he was not to have any contact with Mohammed. His co-accused Alex, Moses, and Ahmed, who had also been in remand, were also granted bail. After being released from police custody and having been fired from his job at the Venezuelan embassy, Dwight completely reinvented himself as a preacher, model, gospel musician, and philanthropist, using a new name, Iguazu AC. At this point, it seemed he had fully abandoned his identity as Dwight Sagari. As Iguazu AC, the musician who sang gospel songs in various local languages, such as Kikuyu, Luya, Masai, Dholuo, Giriama, Kamba, and others, he won several music awards and appeared on numerous radio and TV stations across the country to promote his music and share his story. The media put him on a pedestal and painted him as the Muzungu guy who could sing and speak several local languages, a story that quickly gained attention. Despite appearing on numerous media platforms, both TV and radio across the country, as seen by design, no one seemed to make the connection that Iguazu AC was the same man once accused of killing Ambassador Olga Fonseca in 2012. In one interview, when asked how he ended up in Kenya, he gave a long, vague answer that completely avoided mentioning his former life as a diplomat.
On that,
Thank you.
when you came here, why were you coming to Kenya in the first place? Were you just visiting?
Okay, first place, I arrived in among the international community. I am a lawyer, international public law. I have been in tables of representing as an expertise in international maritime and labor affairs, migration things. Yeah. So in the matter of that, I engaged with Alliance Francaise. I started to have dancers here, but I am a runner of long distance. So I was having fun when I was running, and I see the children following me, running. The children are following me.
Yeah.
Then I continue doing, and a friend said, why don't you come to register in marathon in Kenya? No, I was always afraid to compete there in Latin America. In Kenya. I will less do that. Guess what? I won a marathon in Conabariri, Callado.
Oh.
But, I mean, for sure the people of Eldoret were not there, otherwise.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so, but I won, and then I have suffered an accident after. When I was training to Lewa, a car crashed me from behind. Doctor told that I was not going to walk in 10 years, but I walked in less than 4 months.
Wow.
And from there, I did 2 tracks. I did my album, but with only one gospel song. The gospel song opened the doors of the media stations in Kenya. Now my new fans put me in a situation that you have to decide. In Kenya, you cannot serve the 2 masters. Whether you're a secular or
you decide.
I decide for Jesus, and I started with the Moyo and Iwaranono, and here I am.
Oh my goodness!
As Dwight enjoyed his newly found fame, the murder case against him, Alex, Moses, Ahmed, and Kimgeno remained ongoing. The trial stretched on for a decade. It was delayed by several factors such as pre-trial motions and also the COVID-19 pandemic. Although the trial officially began on 13th November 2013, the final verdict wasn't delivered until July of 2023, nearly 10 years later, and the appeal against the verdict was later determined in March of 2025. It was indeed a long and complex case, and while we won't get into every nook and cranny, we'll break it down into the key highlights. For starters, a damning allegation came to light on Wednesday, 4th December 2013, when the embassy's second driver, called Kevin, was cross-examined by Dwight's lawyer. Kevin told the court that during Ambassador Geraldo Silva's tenure, the embassy's diplomatic bag was used to smuggle narcotics. A quick note on diplomatic bags: they can be anything from a briefcase to a shipping container meant only for official correspondence or other diplomatic materials between the embassy and its home country or other embassies. And it's protected under international law, which means local authorities cannot search, seize, or even detain them. So how is this connected to Olga's murder? Well, several news outlets reported that upon arriving in Kenya, Olga ordered the embassy's diplomatic bags to be delivered to her with their seal unbroken, meaning she was likely getting in the way of the illegal drug trafficking happening at the embassy. The claims of the Venezuelan embassy diplomatic bags being used to smuggle narcotics were never verified, and the government of Venezuela publicly dismissed the drug trafficking allegations and any link between them and Olga's murder. But you cannot help but wonder, why did Mohammed and Dwight want Dwight to sit on the ambassador's seat so badly that they were willing to kill for it? And why did Olga fear for her life? Secondly, Kimgeno Kirui, who had been arrested for being in possession of Olga's phone, was acquitted of the murder charges on 23rd January 2023. The court found no evidence linking him to the murder. He told the court that he came across the phone while walking along Rimuru Road. He picked it up and took it with him on a matatu ride home. He kept the phone in his house for a few months. Later, when he fell ill and needed money, he borrowed some from a friend named Julius and gave him the phone as collateral for the loan. When the police eventually tracked the phone, it led them to Julius, who then led them to Kirui. Thirdly, Dwight challenged the waiver of his diplomatic immunity in court. He referred to the letter sent by the Venezuelan government to Kenya's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which outlined the cancellation of his diplomatic passport and stated that he had ceased acting in his official capacities. Through his lawyer, Dwight argued that while his diplomatic passport had been cancelled, his diplomatic status remained intact. Therefore, he claimed he was still entitled to diplomatic privileges and immunity. However, the court disagreed. It clarified that, based on official communication from Venezuela and in accordance with Article 43A of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, Dwight's diplomatic status had ended once his duties were officially terminated. This meant Dwight was no longer entitled to any diplomatic protection, including immunity from prosecution. Additionally, Dwight testified that on 26 July 2012, between 4 and 5 p.m., he visited a doctor at Sarit Center, and he got home around 8 p.m. and slept through the night. According to Dwight, he only learned of Olga's death the following morning, on 27 July 2012. Although Dwight was not physically present at the murder planning meetings or at the ambassador's residence on the night of the murder with Mohammed, Alex, Moses, and Ahmed, the court found that he had a motive to kill Olga due to the ongoing power struggle at the embassy. The judge noted that Dwight was aware of the murder plot but failed to act to prevent it. Lastly, the judge noted that Ahmed, Moses, and Alex attended multiple murder planning meetings with Mohammed prior to killing Olga. Furthermore, testimonies from the embassy's cook and the driver placed Mohammed and the three men at the scene of the crime on the night of the murder. The court concluded that Mohammed, who is still at large, did not act alone, but had the active assistance of the three men in both planning and executing the crime. In the court's view, the totality of the evidence left no doubt that all the four accused, that is Dwight, Alex, Moses, and Ahmed, were involved in the ambassador's death. In consequence, they were found guilty on 23rd January 2023 and were each sentenced to 20 years in prison in July of 2023. They later appealed the court's decision, but the appeal was dismissed on 7th March 2025. We send our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Olga Fonseca. May her soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you for joining us today. If you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be notified when the next video is up. Until then, please take care, stay safe, always trust your gut.